Hi, I'm Kelly Chase and this is History Detective. And if you've been one of those people swept up in watching the TV show Alone, you're going to love this episode because the star of it, Ada Blackjack, makes those Alone contestants look like amateurs. Ada Blackjack was stranded on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean for more than 2 years. Her 4 male explorer companions all perished in the harrowing Arctic conditions. Not only that, when she arrived on Wrangel Island, she had 0 survival skills. Everything she learned, she taught herself after the men had disappeared and died. Who was responsible for sending 5 relatively inexperienced people to an island with harrowing Arctic conditions? It was the early 1900s and Arctic exploration was big business, especially the money you could make from speaking tours and selling books about your explorations. A chap called Wilhelm Stephenson had done a fair bit of Arctic travel, albeit with Inuit guides to help him survive, and he was trying to sell the idea of the friendly Arctic. He even published a book of the same name. Wrangel Island, which is located about 150 kilometres off the northeast coast of Russia, had previously been claimed as Russian territory. Stephenson decided that he wanted to claim ownership of the island. In 1913, he had organised a failed Arctic expedition where the survivors ended up stranded on Wrangel Island for 9 months. Wrangel Island is an Arctic tundra, and that means that the temperatures are around 0 degrees for at least 10 months of the year. And in winter, for at least a month, the island is in complete darkness because the sun doesn't even come up. 11 people died on this expedition, but 6 years later, Stephenson thought it was a good idea to send 4 more men to live on the island for a year. To be clear, Wilhelm Stephenson wasn't even going on the expedition. He was too busy doing speaking tours promoting this idea of the friendly Arctic. The men arranged for a group of experienced Inuit hunters and guides to accompany them, as well as a local Inuit seamstress called Ada Blackjack. The only problem is that when the day came, the 4 guides didn't turn up, only Ada Blackjack, who had no survival skills. And in 1921, she was very dubious about going to live alone on an island for a year with 4 strange white men. Regardless, she desperately needed the money to care for her sick son, so she agreed to go along. 2 years later, when the rescue ship was finally able to make it through the harsh weather conditions, she was the only one still alive. Ada Blackjack was born Ada Delatuk in 1898 in a small village in Alaska. But after her father died, she was institutionalized into a Christian missionary school where she learnt to read and write to a 3rd grade level. And she also learned skills such as sewing and cooking white people's food. When Ada was 16, she married a local dog musher called Jack Blackjack. Jack was not a particularly nice man. He was an abusive alcoholic. Nevertheless, she had 3 children to him, but sadly, 2 of her children died. Jack abandoned her and her 5-year-old son Bennett in an isolated place called the Seward Peninsula. She was forced to walk, carrying her son 65 kilometres back to the town of Nome. Here, she found work as a seamstress. But because her son Bennett suffered from tuberculosis, which was a serious infection of the lungs, she placed him in an orphanage and vowed to earn some money to get him out and to pay for his medical care. She was promised $50 a month to accompany the men on a mission for a year, and that was a lot of money, especially as she would not have any living expenses in the meantime. Because Ada was brought up in a Christian mission, she was not exposed to her Inupiat culture and had no survival skills. She was afraid of guns and she was absolutely petrified of polar bears. When she first arrived on Wrangel Island, she suffered a case of Arctic hysteria. She refused to work and tried desperately to make one of the explorers marry her. When they created a second trapping camp to send the object of her affection away to, she would hike 10 miles to see him. The methods of punishment that these men used on the 23-year-old Ada were extremely cruel. They locked her outside in the freezing temperatures and tied her to a pole so she would not run away. Eventually, her bout of mental illness subsided, and she began working and contributing to the camp by sewing socks and gloves for the explorers and making meals with the supplies they had brought with them. The island is only accessible for a few weeks a year due to the ice freezing over, and for some reason Wilhelmus Stephenson advised the expedition to only take 6 months' worth of supplies. I guess he believed that the friendly Arctic would provide for them. The problem is that the Arctic was not so friendly after all. The long dark days of winter, coupled with the survival inexperience of the 4 men, was a recipe for starvation. After a year, when the supply ship was expected, the weather was exceptionally bad and it was not able to get through, and so the party of 5 was stuck on the island for another year. Things went downhill from here. One of the men, Lorne Knight, contracted scurvy from not getting enough nutrients. Towards the end of his illness, he was confined to his sleeping bag for 5 months, and Ada cut a hole in the bottom of his sleeping bag so he would not have to get up to go to the toilet. In the meantime, on the 29th of January 1923, the other 3 men decided to set off across the frozen ocean to East Cape, Siberia. These men were never seen again. So for the next 7 months, Ada was in charge of cooking, hunting, gathering, collecting firewood, and looking after an invalid man who was too weak to leave his sleeping bag. The first thing Ada learned to do was to set traps. She also began to keep a diary. Her first entry was dated the 14th of March. The first fox I caught was in February 21st, and then 2nd, March 3rd, and 4th, 5th. That makes 4 white foxes. She caught many foxes and ensured that Knight was getting the prime parts of the animal. But because of the deterioration of his gums and loose teeth, he struggled to eat. As Knight's health deteriorated, he started saying cruel things to Ada, such as her husband was right to beat her up, and no wonder her 2 children died because she couldn't even take care of him. Regardless, she kept on caring for him. By the middle of May, Ada decided she needed to overcome her fear of guns and learn to shoot. She took one of the guns and used an empty tea tin as a target. She kept practicing, and within 2 weeks, she had shot her first bird. On the 23rd of June, Lorne Knight died, and Ada was all alone on the island. The ground was too frozen for her to dig a grave for him, so she built a barricade of boxes around his body to protect him from polar bears and moved into the supply tent next door. She managed to kill her first seal. The next day, she stayed at the camp to clean the seal, and she was visited by a polar bear and her cub. She was deathly afraid, but managed to shoot some rounds to scare them away. Her shooting skills steadily improved until she became a crack shot, and she brought in a reasonably steady stream of food for herself, including seagull, reindeer, seals, ducks, and bird egg. Being a seamstress, she made herself a reindeer coat, and she even created a sealskin boat so she could go fishing. On the morning of the 20th of August, Ada heard a noise that she thought was a walrus. After 2 years, it was a rescue ship, and she was finally able to be united with her son Bennett. I would like to say that things went smoothly from here, but being an Inupiat woman in the 1920s, things didn't. Her diaries were taken off her, and she was exploited by both the man who rescued her and the man who organised the expedition. If you do want to do a deep dive into her story, I highly recommend the book Ada Blackjack, A True Story of Survival in the Arctic by Jennifer Niven. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and if you would like to hear an original song on this topic, you'll find a link to Underestimate Me up there. And in the description below, you'll find a link to my website where you'll find a list of references and links to teaching resources. This is Kelly Chase, on the case. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this video is being recorded today. I pay my respects to the elders and knowledge holders, past, present, and emerging.